That'd be hysterical to find out that on the back end there's a big illegal Wikipedia editing farm.
And they've missed all the good stuff already.
You should have heard what was going on before we went.
Unbelievable.
Homo.
We know where most of the people are having dinner
No,
tonight.
the trick is that, yes, exactly. We have to tease for the end of the scene so that we have to keep the audience. So
I think the term is dramatic foreshadowing. I always like that in English class.
Broadcast television. Because every 8 minutes, the truck almost has to go over the cliff, and then, oh well,
the MacGuffin jumps in.
It could have gone over, and other trucks have, but this truck didn't. Now let's follow our hero down the road for another 6 minutes.
See, we should have a dialogue, Sky, where you take it so far, and then somebody else has to pick up the.
It's the same
script.
dialogue, just different location, different costume, same dialogue.
A table reading on office hours.
I want to. Yeah. Going to try to do that. A friend of mine's got a script that doing for children's theater, and I started ripping it apart as a screenplay, and I want to do that. Have a table read on a Zoom call, and we'll record it. So we'll see how that goes. But again, Grant, yesterday, thank you for your insight and your reflections into the project, the Mad in the Kitchen experience. Because I kind of wanted to raise my hand because I realized your heart is so big in your gracious, response, and I didn't want to hang you, but it was so I accepted and received all of it just so kindly, because it gives me reflection on the efforts that I'm doing, and this concept of doing meta. You helped me understand where and how that could be a possibility as a character, but not as the human. And then where and how does that fit in as a tool in the moving forward process, which of course is what we're trying to do here. And so thank you.
And Sky, when and as it's appropriate, please pass on our best wishes to Madeline.
I do and will, and thank you. And she feels it.
Yeah,
so
it was actually kind of fun to answer the question from two different perspectives. So it was fun if that takes into embarrassment. Takes that into account.
And it's a safe nurture environment here.
Well, it was an innocent mistake. So I think it was obvious to people.
What was the innocent mistake? I missed the whole thing.
They'd let me in.
That's not an innocent mistake. We knew what was going to happen.
There's nothing innocent there, but no. Yesterday, when Grant was giving his perspective of meta as a tool, and he wasn't aware of the full details, and so he gave a gracious explanation of where it was needed and where maybe not. But
I just have suggestions for the wig. I only have one. Pippi Longstocking.
Ooh, in pink.
I think Phyllis Diller willed some of her wigs too. So it's be great.
The late Phyllis Diller is probably where we're going to end up, because
The Simpsons.
In all directions, in hot pink.
10 seconds till live.
Whispering.
This is the part where Mitchell loves whispering. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And I don't even know how to describe what we're doing in the second hour. So Andy Carluccio and Greg Gibson are going to be here, and they're going to show us how to do wondrous things in Zoom with graphics and vMix and pulling data from the chat and the questions. And so it's going to be pretty slick. So stay tuned for that in the second hour. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions and reading our Our questions today is Dennis Champion Walker. Go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you. And our first question today comes from Lenny Nelson in San Antonio. Anyone ever used a tool that takes posts from social media and turns it into a slideshow that I could use for a pre-show or walk-in feed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a... I'm just trying to think of the there are many of these. Social... I'm just trying to think of the ones that are the most... I didn't get to that one fast enough. The what you're looking for is... I think that I want to say socialboard.io is the one that I think that we've used in the past. Basically, it takes those posts and it will format them for a screen, and so it basically puts them out there. Go ahead, Chris.
So for the rocket launch, I hate to keep going back to that, but here we go. Tuomo, who flew in from Finland to help us, he has modules built into his tool, GFX Graphics Composer Engine. Sorry, Tuomo. That will pull posts out of Facebook and I believe Instagram. And I know that for our show, we were leaning on Twitter, and he goes like, I don't really have a module that pulls from Twitter, but I think he wrote one while we were sitting around in dust storms. And if he didn't write it, I think he's close to having it done. But it did some really cool stuff. It'll pull the text in, it'll pull a photo in, and it'll compose it in a pretty little frame. And if the photo doesn't fit in the frame that he has, it will automatically do a little pan and scan on it, a little Ken Burnsy, to eventually show you the whole photo. It worked pretty good.
Yeah, another one is Tagbox, and we used in a recent show, which is that it'll basically format it into a grid and stick them all in there as well. So that'll work. Go ahead, Noah.
I wouldn't call him a tool, but another resource you might look at is contacting Jonas. And it's what's cool about doing these projects like OH Space, and we did the Cyber Rodeo, is like you have incredible people addressing these problems and figuring out solutions to them. So yeah, I would maybe reach out to Jonas as well.
Yeah, if you want something really customizable, or if you want something that is going to tweak it to do it exactly the way you want it, talk to someone like Jonas or talk to someone like Tuomo. These things like Tagbox just have tons of features in them. Then you just pull the little sliders and move them around, and they're not very expensive. So it just depends on which direction you're trying to go. Next question.
Jeremy White from Virginia says, given Blackmagic Design's ATEM updates in the Constellation line, can we expect their new video routers to support input or output selectability?
Go ahead, Noah.
I don't think I've missed anything yet, because their current routers are many years old. So I'm thinking Jeremy's talking about future products, right? The current lineup does support in and out on matrices, right, on their routers, because that's what they do. I think he might also be talking about like network-based routing, which would be interesting. I know they have an Ethernet-based camera system that's new with their studio cameras. So yeah, that could be interesting.
You go, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he means by selectability. The Smart Video Hub series, which they make 3 of, with different, like 12 by 12, 20 by 20, and 40 by 40, I think. They all accept, depending on which model you get, up to 12 gigahertz SDI, and they, of course, can route any input to any output, and they can route... However, I don't believe they scale. They can accept 4K and will route 4K source to a 4K destination and an 8K source to an 8K destination, all on the same hub, but they don't scale 4K to 8K or 8K down to 4K, et cetera, et cetera. But they do have a smart hub. It is a smart hub. It can be controlled with software. And I don't think there's really any much of a reason, since most of the new Constellations are all built for 1080p. They've gone that route. I don't think they really need to change their smart hubs very much to accommodate them.
Go ahead, Grant.
I don't know if this is what he was talking about, but the video hub protocol that is used for those switches is compatible with the ATEM's switches as well. And so when you run the video hub software, it will see the video hubs. And so then, of course, you can switch those, but it will also see the ATEMs. And so with an ATEM Mini, it'll see 2 outputs and then your 4 or 8 inputs on the Minis. And then you can just switch them as if it was a matrix. And so it's actually quite handy in some scenarios where you don't want to use the full ATEM control software, which has a limit of how many connections, active connections you can have. You can kind of alternatively use the Video Hub protocol.
Yeah, and if you're talking about scaling, you don't want a router to scale. I mean, you don't want a router to scale or do processing or anything else. It'll add delay. The router needs to be as low latency as absolutely possible, and not to do anything, because then it adds another variable to your entire chain. Next question.
Peter Moore from Auckland, New Zealand asks, can you look at home studio desks with racks at NAMM, small desk side racks and so forth?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I would also note that in Discord, we just added yesterday, the 6th category down is OH NAMM coverage. So please put that in the Discord so we can discuss it there. But yeah, we would love to check out the small vendors as well as the large.
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't on there, was I?
I have you on there. Go ahead, Sky.
I bypass.
I appreciate, as was just mentioned, yes, all of these specific details are great, because that way for our specific audience, we'll know what you're interested in. But of course, there will always be the other cool things that we can't afford, but would really love to have. It could distract the concept, but Josh and Noah are really driving a great concept here. And so get them the ideas that you want to get information on.
There you go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so the show floor is going to be a little bit more limited, of course, as there. I haven't seen any vendors just yet. They just came out with the interactive maps for any type of desk or anything like that. But most of the time, like I said, in Adorama or Sweetwater, will probably have those as a booth within a booth. So we could definitely check that out.
Let's go to the next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle, Washington asks, in addition to YouTube, if we could stream office hours to another destination, where would it go best?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
As I understand it, office hours is stream agnostic. So I guess we could stream it anywhere we want to, which may be why you're asking the question. But a lot of people in our line of work prefer Vimeo. So that would be the only one I would suggest.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Vimeo is good, but I would probably go Twitch next, because it's so open and we can have a little bit of fun with that. And if we need to shut it down, we can shut it down pretty easy. And it doesn't cost anything.
Bill?
Sorry about that earlier. And Vimeo is a little different for me in that I use other sources for specific things. Vimeo, to me, is the best linkage repository for my work that can go out to other places, because it allows you to act as a feeder for other websites and things like that. So when I put things on Vimeo, I'm usually looking specifically for links into a wider ecosystem. I'm not sure it does the same thing that YouTube does in terms of broad spectrum distribution, because it does get beyond paywalls and corporations, but I don't think that's often where you want to go to build the biggest audience. That's kind of niche, and that's how I think of Vimeo.
My interest is less in the it's less related to getting the largest audience and more related to seeing how the different platforms behave. So I think seeing our work on different platforms is interesting. So my plan is to stream to starting before, probably the next couple of weeks, potentially next week. We'll see. I got to work with Jeffrey on this, but LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, all of those are things that I'm interested in streaming to all at one time every morning. And it's mostly to see, what does the video quality look like? How many people are watching? What are the dwell rates? What are the, just to kind of, see what happens. I think it's an incredible lab for us as media producers to see what our show does on different platforms. Exact same, because it is a pure apples to apples something. So doing it every day will start to, build up, understanding what that looks like. And then finally, satellite someday. So satellite TV, so that anybody can get a hold of it. So we're going to work on all of those things. Next question.
Chris Fenwick from Emeryville, California has a question about music libraries. What are your preferred go-to sources? Paid, subscriptions, and I've heard there are free sources. Talk amongst yourselves.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Paid sources, generally you get what you pay for. Free, not necessarily. You might get lucky. I like Envato Marketplace. They're doing some new things like adding stems to recordings, which is very handy because you can take one theme and you could repurpose it a lot of different ways and change it to meet the emotional content of the action that's going on. And the other one's Pond 5. So I like those two as my main sources.
Good, Sky.
Again, the libraries that have historically, you buy a subscription, you get a new CD a month or something like that. And usually there's one song on a CD historically, but now that everything's being delivered over the internet, things are a little more fresh. I do use this Sonic Fire Pro, which allows you to get the stems of the music, and so you can parse out the drums or increase the level of the timpani or leave the drums out, just do the guitar riff or something like that. So that's a unique concept, but I'm very interested in Premium Beat, and I see Chris is here, so I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say about that.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I would always go with the paid subscription because usually you get better quality music the more you pay, of course. There are free sources out there. I found this on the internet, this Wise Owl, and they list the 20 best royalty-free music sites in 2022, and they have a list of them there. So you might browse that site and come up with some samples, some of the free stuff that's out there, but usually it's not great if it's free, you know.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I use quite a few of them. Mostly in the past couple of years, I've used Premium Beat, and I like them a lot. I do occasionally get the sounds stocky comment back from people, so it's hard to find things that are not. I also, for many years, used a lot of narrator tracks, and they were particularly interesting because I do a lot of narration, in that they orchestrate so that there's not a lot in the range of human speech. So you tend to be able to ride over that music better if you're doing a lot of talking. But the other thing, I'll tell you one of my secret weapons. I ran into an old set of CDs decades ago by a company called Video Helper. And it is the weirdest music. I mean, some of their stuff, it's not all traditional. There are a lot of shorter things, but it is really kind of nuts. I love it for that. And beyond that, the descriptions of the tunes are brilliantly written. Sometimes I found myself laughing in the control room just as I was going through the Video Helper blurbs about the song. So it's fun. There is a lot of really interesting stuff there too.
Good, Chris.
Yeah, Sky, you're dating yourself. Collections of CDs. Come on. When was that? Like in 1990? But you're right. They were bad. There were not, it was just like buying albums in the 80s. There was 9 bad songs and 1 that you could tolerate. I do like Premium Beat. And there's another thing that Premium Beat does that hasn't been mentioned is they have loops. So the song will come to you in loop form. And if you just take each loop and lay it out, it's the same as the full track, but they're loops. So you can say, I want more of this, I want less of this. And the other thing is that the Premium Beat people actually, they train their artists, and they don't just open it up like Pond 5. Oh yeah, get an account, put up your song, make a couple of bucks. They actually hand select artists, and you can search by artist in their tool. And I think part of the thing when you're looking for a tool like this is you really want to look for the whole workflow. You can build playlists. I can send you a link of a playlist of 10 songs real easy. I don't have to download them and email them to you and then have you sort through them and stuff. So but I've heard of some of the free ones, and it's nice to hear other options.
Hey, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I forgot to mention one of the things that I like is that some of these services are now allowing you to buy them out. And if you find a piece of music you really, really like, you can pay a premium and nobody else will be able to use it, because there's nothing worse than having your program for a new pharmacological product being released, showing up on an HR program, and a client recognizes, oh yeah, I heard that on the HR thing. So buying out is a nice little added thing to get if you can get it.
Good, Chris.
Yeah, that's super cool. A few years ago, I had a client. We had a piece of stock music we'd used for a series. Like every month we were putting this show out. And one day I'm clicking through YouTube, and the same cut of music was used on a tutorial on how to make a head blow up in After Effects. And I was like, we may want to pick different music.
Yeah, the one, there's basically three things that I do now for beds, for almost all of them. For the needle drop, I'm using Epidemic Sound, and the reason for that is that they license it to you. They put it on YouTube and all the other platforms, and then they claim it, and then they leave it opened. And if as long as you have the subscription with them when you created the content, like when you posted it, you have it forever. I mean, you're not gonna get any copyright flags. And the big problem with Pond 5 and a lot of these other ones is that they don't have some way to tie back into YouTube. It'll get claimed on somebody else's video. They'll claim their video, and they're not claiming the song, but it gets claimed, and then you get copyright claims on your stuff, and so it really becomes problematic. So Epidemic Sounds handles it. It's got all the sorting features we were talking about earlier. It has stems so that you can break it down. It's awesome. I mean, I love being able to have something full in the open, and then you cut 3 of the stems out, and you just have the in the back, and then come right back up again, and you get all those bits and pieces to it. I find that the music is much more modern, and it's much more original, and it's got everything. I mean, it is unbelievable how much stuff is there. So for the needle drop stuff that's there, if I think that I can hack through it at Logic, I'll sit there and build little things, because I just want that way I know that it's my own, or something like my own with some loops and occasionally a keyboard, just to add little bits and pieces to it. And then finally, composers. Composers are not nearly as expensive as you think. I mean, for like a little project, it's not that big of a deal, but I've had like the bed created for a commercial, like a 1.5 minute open video for like $5,000. It's not, people shouldn't think it's like, people who are really good at it in LA, you give them a sense of what you want, and they're just like, it takes them like, half a day to put something together that sounds better than anything you're going to get otherwise. And so, and then it's to the beat. It's exactly what you want. I mean, it's really a luxury to do that. We work with some companies that actually, they've started to move away when they're doing live streaming from using pop songs, and they build a library. They'll spend $100,000, $150,000. They'll build a library for the year. These are big companies, Fortune 10 companies. They'll build a library for a year, and this is all you hear when you go in. And it actually is great because it creates this certain feeling. You're at this kind of event, and they own it all, and it's just the theme to everything they're doing for that year. And then they change it again. Next question.
Next question comes from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. He says, in this Sweetwater video, and he has a link which he gives a timestamp for, you can see all the modules at the top. What are these? Is this a standard for modules like this? And where to buy the rack?
Everyone's trying to cut and paste this into their thing here. I think that this, I don't know what the size is. I don't know if it's an RU. It does look like a standard Euro rack height. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it may be something custom there. It looks like a 4RU height panel there on top and a 1RU on the bottom. That those vertical modules are designed to go into, they don't go into a common backplane because they're all different manufacturers. So either they're just sitting on a shelf, and that there's a piece of a horizontal piece that you can screw them into. But I don't think that's a standard. Maybe any of the rack manufacturers have something designed for that, but it does look that like each of those individual modules are a multiple of a certain width. So maybe somebody makes something with that standard 1, 2, or 3 width.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Module.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't recognize it because I didn't look at the link. That's a 600 series rack that is a standard, and all of those modules are designed to fit and have the right pinouts to go to the back of the rack. So that's a standard. The rack itself is a powered rack that you can put everything from the big old RMX16 in there to a single. It's just a standard that's out there, and you can find it all over the place.
Yeah, it is 5.06 inches high. So it's a Eurorack standard 3U. It is 3U. It matches up with that. So, but that's, you do have to make the Euroracks the same so they log into that. And some if people are interested in Euroracks, definitely put that in the second hour suggestions. I have a couple of folks that I'd like to bring in to talk about that. Next question.
Peter Moore is back from Auckland, New Zealand, and he has a friend who says she wants a vocal mic to record her songs. I initially suggested a USB mic, but I've decided I'm going to give her my Focusrite Scarlett Solo latest version. What XLR mic should I recommend to her? Up to a $500 budget.
Go ahead, Bill.
It's going to be a little bit touchy finding XLR-driven condenser mics that are really of high quality in the $500 range. You can do it. I'm not sure I know. I think Shure has a couple of things. Mostly when you get into those really good vocal mics for condensers that work with that are really high quality, you want to go a little bit above that. So I'm whiffing on finding specific models in the back of my head for condensers at least.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, a large diaphragm condenser. A TLM 103 is about twice what your budget is, a little more than twice what your budget is, and that would be a good vocal mic for use in a studio. The one I'm talking to you now on is a budget version of the Stellar X2, and they make the X2 Vintage as well, and they're $200 to $250, so they're about half what your budget is. And I think they have a nice, clean sound. They're designed to mimic the sound of the Neumann U87 and U67. So it has a very nice, clean preamp, low noise, low self noise, and a good frequency response. It's very clean, and I really like the output of it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So since I don't really know if she's starting getting in this or she's been doing this for a while, if she wants a good starting mic, I would probably point her towards a Shure SM85, not the 58, but the 85, which has a little bit, you need phantom power for that. It's got a higher range for a female voice. It's a good dynamic, it's a good microphone for that. But then if you really want to get some lower end stuff, MoVo, MOVO makes a few different microphones that have shock mounted, and you get the whole thing with a windscreen, shock mount, and everything like that. Those are good starter mics right there.
Yeah, and I think that an SM7B or an MV7 are pretty solid mics that are well under that budget. The MV7 is pretty much the SM7B, except with a USB connection to it. So same capsules. So that could be a really solid one inside of that price range. The TLM 102, which is what both Chris and I have, are just a little over that budget. They're, I think they're like $650 or something like that. So $600. And so the two of us have those, and I think they have a great sound. They have a great high-end response, very solid response. And so I would take a look at that if you can stretch just a little bit.
High-end Guitar Center.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
And Peter Moore, if you can, give us an idea what her voice is like, because if she has a really strong soprano or something like that, some things will be a little bit harsh on that. She might want to go in a different direction. There is color to different microphones, so her color as a performer will sometimes inform what mic would be best for her.
Yeah, and I really recommend, if you can, to go into somewhere that you can look at the mics rather than order them online, and have her sing into one mic after the other. Especially women have, I think, more of a challenge with this than men with a lot of mics, that they really have, the mic has to be really the right one for them. We had a podcast with someone that was hard to listen to because the mic wasn't really didn't react to her voice. We got her a new mic and it was night and day. So and the mic we got was less expensive than the mic we'd given her before. And so it's important to look at how that frequency response of that and how it affects things. Go ahead, Chris.
As people start to get together, like, for example, I know there's a Seattle get together. And I realize, Peter, this is a bit of a lift for you, but there should be a New York City meetup, and y'all should just meet at B&H, because that's like geek mecca. It's so beautiful. I mean, it's such a fun experience. I was there several years ago, and my lighting guy actually wanted to buy a microphone. Weird. And I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to listening to salespeople. It's like, yeah, shut up. Tell me this. Okay. The help that he got from this guy at B&H was spectacular. And it's like one of the few places on the planet you can go, I want to hear this one instead. Oh, I have that one. Of course you do. You're B&H.
I love going to B&H. I just have to say, like, it's like when I'm in New York, I go in. The problem is really just how much money I've been known to spend there when I get there, because it's just, you get there, you get talking to people, and the next thing you know, you're buying. I know I don't need this right now, but I'm going to need it, and it's just, and I'm here, and next thing you know, that your wallet's on fire. But it's Chris is right. There's very few places, not no places, but very few places where you have the wide variety of experts across it. You can walk into a music store and you'll have a music person that, if you get at the right place, they'll know what they're talking about. But this one is just, it's everything, every vertical in what we do, there's somebody who really knows what they're talking about.
Can somebody please capture that moment where Alex said Chris is right? Keenan, can you grab that for me? Thank you.
All right, next question.
Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware says, now that baby formula is in short supply, what is the solution to the continuing chip shortage?
I don't know how those are connected. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I can't speak to the baby formula, but the chip shortage is a real challenge that my company faces. So I work for a fiber internet provider, and we are starting to plan for 9-month installations. And that means order the product now, plan for it now, and make sure you buy more than you think you need if you're having to buy it now, or make the stuff you have stretch, a lot longer. I was talking to a customer the other day who is in a small, they manufacture custom small electronics, and he said he expects the shortage to be at least a year away from being finished. And I think Intel has kind of said the same thing. So expect at least a year on those kind of things.
Yeah, we're definitely hearing 18 to 24 months from a lot of folks. So just saying it's going to, and the problem is what you're talking about. We talk about this a lot in live events of how when there's pressure, human behavior changes. So people, and I try to explain to people, like they say, well, we stress tested the system. I'm like, well, did you stress test that when that button is a little delayed, people will keep on banging on it? That's what breaks things is people. And so what you're talking about is people are buying way more than they need because they're not sure when they're going to get it again. And so this kind of run on goods makes the whole thing even worse. I mean, it's the natural thing, and it's what you should do if you have the money to do it. But it just keeps just pulling it out. Now go ahead, Chris.
I hope they're not related, because the baby formula thing is a big deal. I mean, it's a really big, my niece called me a couple of weeks ago and she goes, can you check the stores where you are? And yes, here's the thing. Human behavior is you want to feed your baby. So I bought her 3 months worth of baby formula, and I'm glad I did, because that was a few weeks ago and now it's just getting worse. Yeah. I was just at Target last night. The shelves are empty. Yeah. I'd love to know what the cause of that is.
Yeah, Mitchell.
The connection between the two is that once it becomes a shortage item, everybody buys it out and it's no longer available. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. Now, granted, the baby thing started with a problem with a recall, but the fact that it's a shortage, it's a thing like TP, tissue paper it's now a problem.
Yeah, it's an interesting puzzle, because then there's I do find the shortage to be a fascinating model to study. People should be getting their PhDs on this, because it's so fascinating that like a lot of the audio stuff is connected to the AKM fire. So the fire, this one company in Japan made all of the AD converters that everybody uses everywhere, and so they had kind of swallowed up that market. And then when they had a fire, it just blew the whole. It went from a $3 item to a $250 item, and you have to wait for 18 months. That's why we don't have a lot of the audio hardware we need. But what it does is it forces all these folks to read. There's this thing that I've been talking to some folks in the manufacturing. The companies are looking at bringing this stuff back online and adding more resources, but the companies buying it from them are writing around their hardware. Like they're redesigning their hardware to not need that thing that's behind. And so they don't know how much more capacity to add, because they don't know if the capacity will be there by the time they get there. Like if it takes a year to build another fab, the demand may not be there for that fab by the time it gets there. And so it creates this, it's not just something that's shortage, it's just chaos in the projection market, which causes all kinds of problems. Go ahead, Bill.
I think Alex is spot on with this. It is, these are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars as an investment for a chip fab plant, and losing that AKM facility messed up a whole ton of things. We are starting to get these new technologies like the field programmable gate arrays, and I don't know enough about silicon design to understand whether that and the tend to things like the Apple M series, which is a highly integrated chip that has tons of capability on it that can be used for tons of different things. I'm not sure whether those two things are going to make it possible in the future to get a low-cost massive processor that makes those little specific AD converters less important. And I think the whole industry is just trying to suss this out, and it's really hard right now.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Don't forget, Shanghai and other cities in China have been on lockdown, severe lockdown for weeks, which is exacerbating the problem. We're talking to the telemetry people for our next rocket, and they're a year out on telemetry.
Yeah. Next question.
Jason Robertshaw from Sarasota, Florida says, has anyone used the new HyperDeck Shuttle HD? Choosing between the HyperDeck Shuttle and the Studio. Pros and cons for Zoom virtual learning programs with lots of short clip playbacks.
Good, Courtney.
I'm not sure HyperDeck is your best choice there, but because I've always found the HyperDecks, I have a Shuttle Mini HD. And when I got it, I lamented the fact that it was difficult to mark things and do playlists. There wasn't really off-the-shelf software they didn't offer for doing that kind of stuff. So playing back a series of clips, they all have the same time code, a serial, it puts each clip into a serial time code stream. So you got to know the time code start. And it doesn't have the ability to mark time code in and time code out and play a clip by just time code start and stop, unless there's some third-party software that uses the API to do that. So maybe they've changed it with the new Shuttle HD with the big knob on it. I know Mitch has it, and he's going to come up here and speak in a second. I don't know if he's had a chance to use it, but I think it has the HD, the new one that they announced, is you have less control over that because you just have an HDMI in and HDMI out, so you can record and playback, but it doesn't have the little built-in screen. And I think that little built-in screen that is on all the other HyperDecks is very useful to queue up. It shows you the time code and it shows you the audio levels of the left and right channel. And all of those readouts, don't exist since you only have one video output of the new one. And that video output has to go on the air on the screen. So you can't necessarily monitor the audio levels, the time code, or anything else while you're playing it out.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, all the negative things that Courtney was saying about the regular HyperDeck has been solved on this little guy, who I have not hooked up, but so far I've learned quite a few things about it. One thing, it is designed to play back clips, so you can mark them. You can mark them right up here, and you can also scroll through clips. And the fact that it doesn't have a monitor on it is not a problem, because all you have to do is, once it's connected to your Extreme or your ATEM, you can just look at the multi-view, and you can see everything you need to see right there in the screen. So there's a number of things that I begin to like about it without even using it. This is a weighted knob. It's a very tactile knob. It's not a plastic crappy thing. It's got a real feel to it. So it's a real. Oh, sorry, I did say that word, didn't I? So it's easy to use. It makes sense. It's like the Da Vinci knob. The buttons are ergonomic and make sense. It's designed to sit right next to the ATEM at the same slope angle. So once I actually hook it up and plug it in, I'll be able to confirm all the things I've been promised about it. But I'm happy to have it. Thank you, Guy. Appreciate shipping and getting it here so quickly.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and let us know if there's something like if you're using it with the ATEM software where it can trigger a playback when you take it. Is there any way to see, when you're playing a clip out, you say, well, it doesn't have that little display, but that doesn't matter because you can see it in the multi-view. Well, in the multi-view, you're seeing the main video out, so you can't tell where you are in the clip. Is the clip a third of the way through? Is it halfway through? Is it about to run out? I don't know, because I'm not looking at the time code. I don't know what the out cue is, or I don't see a little progress bar. So without those kind of indicators, I like to have all those indicators in the play out machine, so I know, okay, 28 seconds till we're out, and without having to run a stopwatch on it. So I'm curious to know if there's a software interface or if the ATEM software that controls the HyperDeck gives you any indication of where you are in the clip, et cetera.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that too. Mitchell, you said on the multi-view, you have more information. What information can you see on the multi-view?
Well, you can see the clips. You can. I don't know if it sees time code. I haven't looked that up yet.
Yeah, let's look it up and play with it.
Yeah, let's put it up on.
Good after hours.
Sounds like we're talking out of turn. You have it right there. We'll give you. Let's see. It's 7:35. Let's come back to this one at 7:40.
It's a good
revisit this question.
It's good after.
Yeah, it's an after hours project. You haven't seen under my desk, so it would not be an easy project.
Yeah, I think that if you didn't need a lot of jog and shuttle and so on and so forth and so on and so forth, I would also look at Playout B, Raspberry Pi or a PC or Mac that you can have there that's just going to play it out. It's going to act like a HyperDeck if you know what you have, and you can throw those in. And we have access to the developer because Jonas is part of our community. And so if you have requests, you can actually talk to someone you know. So I would take a look at Playout B as well. And then the one that we use in our office, because we have some high bit rate and other things, is Softron's on the air. It's a lot more expensive than these other solutions. The big advantage for us is that it does 10-bit. We can do 10-bit and very high resolution. We can output as many channels as we want via Dante. So there's a bunch of things that we need that you don't need for that. But it's a very pleasurable piece of software to use. It's just really well designed, and it will interface with the ATEM as a HyperDeck. Next question.
Turn it down, my wife screams as we watch shows on Netflix, says John Preto from Las Vegas. I'm often frustrated while watching many shows on Netflix because you cannot hear the dialogue, and then the audio levels peak during high energy scenes. Why?
Go ahead, Grant.
Well, I hate to be the one to tell you this, John, but you're not as young as you used to be. And something that happens with hearing is you lose a little bit of that as you get older. Some others will probably talk about how they, do the compression of the different elements of the shows. But one tip for me in my happy home, happy wife, happy life. We started, because we use an Apple TV, we started using AirPods and using separate AirPods because you can use two at a time, right? And so we actually just use one each of our own AirPods, and you have individual control on the Apple TV, and you can turn them up and down as much as you like, and we can still talk to each other, and the house is nice and quiet, the kids are happy, we're watching. It's a happy life. So I can absolutely suggest having multiple AirPods is a great way to go.
Good, Noah.
Super interesting solution, Grant. That's fun. Yeah, I think maybe the style shifting, because I know in music specifically, there's a lot more compression happening, right? And so we're used to levels being more consistent and higher when we listen to a lot of music and a lot of things. So that might be part of it too, is like the contrast in a movie or something on Netflix might just be at a wider range that we're used to. Obviously, the age thing, even at 31, I feel like I'm in the same boat with you, John, where the dynamics are a little too much sometimes. But there's also room noise, right? So those shows are usually designed around like a really, really quiet mixing room. And so having just a little bit of room noise, you lose the quieter stuff on the low end. But I've always been interested in seeing like an inline compressor of some sort in a home theater system so that you can normalize that a little bit.
All those sound designers are just like, sacrilege.
Yeah,
sacrilege.
Probably. I'm saying cursed words there, but
yeah, there's like that's definitely not the artist's intent. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah.
First of all, +1 on what Grant said, because that's what I've been doing. I found for a while I was watching my iPad on the couch and not even turning my big TV on because the AirPods made it sonically much more alive for me. And then I realized that I could hook them up to the Apple TV there and listen that way. And so I do that quite a bit. So quite a bit of the time my wife walks through the living room and it's dead silent and I'm enjoying some series of explosions. I did want to mention dynamic range, which is something, it's the ratio or the amount of difference between the loudest and the softest sounds, right? In the real world, we all understand that somebody talking to you from 3 feet away and an explosion have tremendously different loudnesses in reality. So to the extent extent that good sound designers, particularly in action movies and things like that, pay attention to this, they will keep a separation between the loudness of loud things and the softness of soft things, which means if you turn it up because you're having a little struggle with hearing things for the dialogue and that explosion comes by, I can see why it annoys neighbors tremendously. It's the opposite of compression, and sometimes they're both valuable. You can have everything at the same level and not have those big peaks and valleys, but the peaks and valleys do have their artistic sense.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the fact that there's 5.1 or 7.2 or whatever flavor you're listening to means that certain receivers, certain devices allow you to go in and adjust the dialogue volume. You can adjust it. Some even do it automatically for you
if it's mixed correctly. If it's set up correctly.
Obviously it has everybody. Sometimes it gets right between your taste and where it is. And for those that yell at me that say it's too loud, I generally remind them, if it's too loud, you're too old.
Go ahead, Chris.
What I was thinking, and I've been thinking about this first of all, Grant, if I asked my wife to wear AirPods while we were watching TV, she'd think we were strapping in on a SpaceX launch to go to the ISS. So that's never going to happen. But what would be awesome if Apple could figure out, they're pretty smart down there, Cupertino, let the TV do the TV thing, but also let the grumpy old guy put his AirPods in and adjust his own volume. Like if I could have the live speakers in the room, but me, hearing aid mode, I would actually enjoy watching movies at home again.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've had this problem with a lot of people who have reported to me, and I've had it occasionally myself. And what happens to me, at least in my experience, is it depends on how you're viewing Netflix. And Netflix makes available several different sound formats. There's 5.1, 7.1, PCM stereo. And if your TV can only do 2-channel, or you've got a sound bar that only does 2.1, make sure it's not set to stream 5.1. Because if it's downloading the 5.1 stream, it may combine those. It depends on what you're using to stream it onto and whether it understands the 5.1 matrix. It can it tries to generate a phantom center channel, which is where all the dialogue goes on a on a 2-channel or 2.1 system. So if it's getting encoding information from 5.1, if it thinks it's 2.1 and it's set to 5.1, the encode matrix can combine incorrectly and cancel a lot of the center channel, which is where the dialogue is. So the music will be much louder and the sound effects will be much louder and the dialogue will be buried. And so just go through, and if you have stereo, make sure you set it to 2.1 or PCM stereo and see if you can hear the dialogue a lot better, because that may be the solution, what you're up against.
Yeah, I have a 7.1 system in it, and I noticed that I've definitely decided that there are just some things that have not been, most of the stuff sounds great. Sometimes I think they're not mixing it correctly, or we're not getting, the first channel should be the same, so it shouldn't be a problem, but it does sound like there's something wrong. Where it's obvious that the dialogue track is too low and it's not being heard. And I think that I also, some of them you think that there's something wrong, but it's the way Christopher Nolan wants to mix it, which is that it makes it unlistenable half the time. And I will admit,
mumblecore.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, like I didn't understand. I realized I didn't understand at all what had happened with Tenet until I turned the dialogue on, and so because it was just this wash of things, and so it is. There's also a style that's emerging of, really mixing the audio and creating confusion with that as part of the art form, which is unfortunate.
Alex, nobody suggested get a new wife. That's another solution.
No, I'm not going to.
The other thing is,
I am very happy with the one that I have. I'm going to keep this one. So anyway, next question.
I'll turn closed captionings on this. That's the other solution.
Yeah.
Next question comes from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. Can you use more than one X-Touch universal control surface at the same time to have 16 active faders?
Go ahead, Grant.
For what application? I wondered, X32 or a DAW or?
Yeah, I'm looking, I guess, at both, because my church uses a DAW, and then I am planning on having, or I'm considering some X32 racks and using the X-Touch as the controller for that.
Yeah, so there's a Behringer video where they show Logic being using 3 of the X touches connected to the same logic instance. And that works really well. There's also I guess you've already got them, but there is that expander module that gives you another 8 faders, and so you don't have that. You don't need the center controller panel that kind of has all the extra transport controls and things like that. It just has 8 extra faders, and so which kind of tells you that they can manage having multiple units running together. And the other thing is that there's several different protocols that you can switch them into. And so you could run them in different protocols to make them work and then just set the pages to be different. So I think and then if all else fails, you could use some different software and something like central control and map all of it. And so now you could really kind of dial it in and control it and not just use X touches, but Stream Decks and all sorts of things as well.
I think the highest number of X touches that we've had to one switch mixer, which was a QL1, maybe a CL1 or 7 or CL5, was 6. So 6 of them they were all given different areas in that mixer to work, because we were basically having the operators run 6 different rooms with Brian Maddox overseeing all of them. They're all sitting in front of them mixing the mix for that. And he's just able to jump into every scene and take a listen and make sure it's going the direction it needs to go. Next question.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And he has a question for Noah. For those interested in being a part of office hours coverage of NAMM and or CineGear, how can we get involved?
Real quick, Noah.
Yeah, the easiest things to get involved on Discord and give us your thoughts of what we should cover. If you want to be a part of the crew and a little bit more involved, we have a meeting today at 9:30 right after this show. So please ping me or Josh, and we'll get you part of the crew. And we'll have regular meetings up until each show.
And I highly recommend it. I highly recommend getting involved. It's just a great way to meet people. Next question.
And our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. For independent creative and technical professionals, would there be a management agency that could help with finding and retaining clients and managing those relationships?
Go ahead, Courtney.
There are, but the problem with finding a manager or an agent is that you have to have a pretty good business going to begin with for an agent to be interested in it. So good agents, handle more of the top tier clients. And the bad agents don't have the connections to get you the job. So it's kind of a difficult situation to deal with. There are places like Production Hub and where you can list yourself along with other people. So it's a good common source to list yourself for jobs, and you can put a description of what you do, et cetera. Or there are some directories that, LA and New York have LA 411 and in New York 411. And the Creative Industry Handbook, where if you have a business or a certain talent that is listed in any of those handbooks, you can do that. But I haven't found them to work really that well. And remember, you're going to be paying an agent a percentage of any income that you have. And it's pretty difficult to deal with in a gig economy where scheduling, if you're just one person, scheduling is imperative, and projects overlap, and it becomes a nightmare of negotiations and scheduling. And so if you do turn it over to an agent, you have to give them full control of your calendar so that they know that you haven't booked something into a deal that they're working on that overlaps and you have a scheduling conflict. So it's rife with problems. It's a minefield, and I'd be careful about getting into it until you're at the point where you're desired by a large number of people and can't deal with all of the calls coming in.
Next question.
Our next question is from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. Does anyone have experience with the CAIM TV Accordion or the Proaim scissor jibs?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't have any experience with these, but I've looked at it, and they're pantographs, which is a scissor type jib.
I look at it every time I go to IBC. There's this booth that has them, and I always play with them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to have one of these. They're just so great, and then I never get one.
Yeah, and what I worry about is lateral sway, because they do have a double sided with a little axle in between. So there's some horizontal stability built in. Right. The other thing to deal with is when you're extending out the length of something, the weight that you put on the end is going further away from your fulcrum. So your counterweight has to be moving further back. And Technocrane handles this very, very carefully. These pantographs don't seem to have very much adjustability in changing that offset distance depending upon the weight that is hanging off the end. And most of them show very lightweight little gimbal cameras, right, like, that are on there, like this Osmo, et cetera, that I wouldn't put anything of weight out on the end of these.
Yep. You go, Bill, real quick.
Exactly what Courtney said. I took one look at this and I went, as the pantograph extends, the balance is going to go way out of whack. How in the world would you keep from tilting down constantly as you extend the pantograph? Doesn't make any sense to me. But if they've been selling it that long, maybe some people like it. But I've never seen one out in the field.
I've never seen one in the field. I've only seen them at IBC, and I play with them every time going, I think of all the shots I could do that aren't swinging, pushing straight in, and it looks cool, but I haven't used it either. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, why do many types of enterprise-grade servers and IT equipment, like the IBM POWER range, require 200 to 240 volts power, even when deployed in North America?
Jeffrey, real quick.
It's about the amps. So a 240, you can put in a 30 amp fuse, as opposed to 120, which at best you can do 20, and you don't want to have that popping left and right.
Yep, good, John.
Jeffrey nailed it.
Next question.
John Wallace from Pontiac says, this past week, 2 great suggestions from office hours were Center Stage, Castle Point, wireless provider, and Perfect Q. 2 things most people might not consider, but made a very big difference for our event. Thank you.
Pleasure. We can't wait to have you back, John. Next question.
Peter Moore from Auckland, New Zealand says, given Behringer and Thomann with their Harley Benton range, etc., are disrupting price points without sacrificing quality-ish, what does the panel think this will do to the various industries they are disrupting? Happy for this to be a Tuesday question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be, when you see something get commoditized, you need to find a way to be special. So I think what it's forcing everyone, no one can put out something that's kind of average in the middle or just sit down on it. I think that if what you're talking about is a lot of the sequencers and, a lot of the other things that Behringer makes, I think that they are looking at things that have been around for a long time and they're making them less expensive. And most people can't hear the difference, but some can. And so that is and I buy a bunch of Behringer sequencers because I'm not a professional, synthesizer person. I just want to play with them. So it's great for me. I know when I buy an RD8 Mark II, I'm not buying an 808. But I think that what it does force people to do is be creative and really push towards a higher quality. But it doesn't leave a lot in the middle. Bill, real quick.
The digitization of all this equipment, where it used to be all sorts of complex circuits with tubes and things like that, and now it's down to VLSI, very large scale integration on a single chip, has made these economies of scale super possible. So I don't think this is going to stop anywhere soon. Yeah. I think you're going to get more capable gear at less price always.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And there is a lot of snobbery in the industry. If your equipment is going to be visible to the public and the people that are hiring you, a lot of times they may look down their nose if you're using some Behringer equipment. They're used to something that with a more prestigious name on it. So you can take that into consideration. Is if you're using it at home and nobody sees it and it sounds good to you, by all means, take advantage of the commoditization price.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think all the gear that I have over here would be the price of one of the originals. so it's like, so I can say, and I think again, if I get really good at it and I decide I want to turn it into something, I can do it. But the thing that I always remember, and I'll say this really quickly, and I've talked about this before, is I had a friend that had a coffee house that Starbucks moved a cat corner to them, and their business actually expanded because they made better coffee and they had a better experience when you got there. This is Josh will know Beehive, and the Beehive did really well, even after Starbucks came, because people go to Starbucks and they end up at the Beehive anyway. And so, they didn't have to be, an average coffee shop would have gone under, is because they were different that made it special. Next question.
Jason Robertshaw from Sarasota, Florida says, I'm using an iPad Pro 11-inch for mobile Zoom virtual tours. Is there a way to get audio in and out to 2 headsets for a host and a guest expert? Both need to hear and speak to the audience. Can't use built-in mics and speakers.
Go ahead, Bill.
One of the solutions, the Saramonic DI Plus, it'll allow 2 XLR mics into it. It has a headphone jack that's it's powered by a 9-volt battery, but you can split that into 2 headphones. And so I think this, with a lightning connector, would attach to your iPad Pro and probably do all of that in one device. About $160, something like that.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. The Rode, what are they? To go? I've got them.
The Rode Go.
But anyway, Rode to go.
Go
That's it. The thing is, I'm just trying to work out separating, because ideally it'd be great to be wireless for both headphones and for the microphones. You definitely got the microphones covered, and then just working out something with doing some wireless headphones off of that 3.5-inch. There's definitely a combination there, but when you think about being able to do USB audio into the iPad, now you can start to think about different interfaces that you could use.
Yeah, next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida says, now that we're traveling to gigs again, what is your best method for getting some sleep on an aircraft? Thanks.
Noah?
It's all about the headphones. You got to have good in-ears that also either noise cancel or naturally have like earplug type things, 26 decibels, 30 decibels of noise. But what's interesting is my wife is a super light sleeper, so she cannot sleep on airplanes where I can sleep almost anywhere. So you just have to really want it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, headphones don't work for me because they just fall off. For me, it's walking the airport a couple times, getting on the plane, getting to my seat, sitting down, and trying to fall asleep at that point. I can sleep until the plane gets to about 35,000 feet, and then I'm awake for a little while. Maybe I'll get a little cat nap in, but that's how I do it.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, I guess I'm like, no, I can sleep sitting up. It's kind of scary. But I do find that if I pull the armrest up, if it's possible, without disturbing the neighbor beside you. And also many of them have the little ability to pull your headrest, little wings that come in and kind of keep your head from bouncing. And yes, I've moved from the noise canceling big giant head muff from Bose down to the in-ears from Apple. And that's been very helpful. And also you can, often watch your own TV/movie or something on your mobile device of some kind. And in the new 737s, they've got this little shelf now that you can put your little camera right, your TV right there.
Yeah, I use the little neck thing that goes up into a little ball. I can put it back into what I'm doing, so I can lock my neck into the back there. I also never get, if I'm on a long flight, I'll never get more than 3 or 4 hours of sleep the night before, because I'm actually priming myself to go to sleep. I'm tired and somewhat irritable, but I will go to sleep very quickly. And then there's a technique where you tense that I learned a long time ago, where you tense your body, different body parts up. And you start at your feet and move all the way up, and you tense it, hold it, let it go, and I will fall asleep very quickly if I do it effectively. So it's a very effective thing where you pull you tense all your muscles in your feet, then your legs, and then you keep going up, and you will relax, and it will oftentimes put you to sleep. Next question.
Simon Ray from Shrewsbury in Shropshire says, what resource do you use to make an educated guess at the pronunciation of foreign names?
Bill, real quick.
Stage one is to understand it's always going to be just an educated guess, because no matter how hard you try and study, different cultures just have things that get in your way. I remember doing indoor soccer, and the Czechoslovakian and that area names were almost impossible. Plus, you get into the Pacific Rim and Asian names, and sometimes things like NG, you're just going, there's 4 or 5 different ways I can pronounce this, and I need to ask that person which way they go.
Right. Next question. I'm sorry, Dennis, go ahead. I jumped too quickly. Go ahead. Next question. Go ahead.
So when I'm reading on office hours, I refer to the pronunciation guide that people have given in Mukana and also Google. Often there are US states abbreviated to 2 characters that I don't know off the top of my head, so I have to look them up.
And last question for the first hour.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana says, opinions on the Studio Assets SA1241 MegaMast carbon fiber camera stand, 27.5 foot for a Mevo start as a high shot. And he gives a link.
Wow. I have not used this, but now I want to. Now that I've seen it, there is 27 feet. So this is for those listening to this. This is it's $769. So it's not like an inexpensive thing, but it will extend up. I think that you're going to have a lot of stability issues. So I think using it outside would be difficult, but inside could be really interesting for a high and wide. I can see a lot of use. I do a lot of time lapses for builds, and I think this would be a really great one to use. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Noah, real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. I think it's going to sway way too much if you get way too high on that thing.
Just on the if you're outside, but I think inside, on a stable.
Well, even
floor.
inside, if there's some vibration going, maybe HVAC's going and blowing it in the wind. Yeah, I think you'll get a little bit more vibration than you expect.
Go ahead, Noah. Real quick.
I think we could have used this in the desert with some tie straps to get it, nice and solid, and do a time lapse of the build.
Yeah, that would have been cool. All right. We are now changing subjects to our second hour, and we've got a great group to be here for the second hour. We've got Andy Carluccio. Hi, Andy. And Greg Gibson. Mark Caniglio. I'm really excited to have you here, Mark. Hi. We haven't seen you in a long time. Here. Yeah, absolutely. And John Idelson is here, has joined us for the second hour as well. And I don't know how to set this up, so I'm just going to hand it off to Andy. Andy talked to me about it yesterday, and all I was left with was, this is going to be so cool. so anyway, go ahead, take it away, Andy.
Cool. So what I want to first do is punt it over to Greg to talk about the problem that he's trying to solve, and then I can come in and we'll talk about how we solved it, give you a little demo, and then take your questions.
Sure. Well, thanks, Andy. So, as a producer of virtual events, I don't do a lot of stuff that's just usually in plain vanilla Zoom. Typically, I'm staging and packaging my presenters up in a separate session, and then we're pushing that out into another webinar or meeting where the audience typically would be. And we do it that way because if we're just have everybody in the same session and we're pulling video out and we're pushing video back in again, we just run into a lot of issues. We run into audio sync issues. We just get a much cleaner entry and exit point when we can stage people separately. And it just works better from a production standpoint. The problem that we run into and the pushback that we typically get from clients is that because we're staging them separately from the audience, they don't have direct access to the chat or the Q&A in the audience meeting. So we've had to come up with workarounds. So we've done things like we have a staff member that'll sit in the audience webinar, and they'll copy and paste questions into a shared Google document. We've had people use WhatsApp or text messages just to transport a workaround to get the chat and the questions back over to the speakers in a separate meeting. And so I've talked to Andy a few times, over the past year or so about different ways of doing that. And one method that he came up with early on was he wrote me a little script that was a chat bridge app. And what it would do is it would actually move the chat and the questions from the audience meeting into the chat in the meeting where the presenters were. And that worked pretty well. But the problem with it is that we didn't have an ability to be able to bring that into vMix as a lower third. So those of you that use vMix know we have this nice app called vMix Social. It works great for being able to pull chat and questions from YouTube or Facebook or Twitch. It doesn't work with Zoom though. And believe me, I don't understand why we can't get vMix to do that and have the folks at vMix to get a better integration with Zoom, because I think it's like a huge lacking feature, and Zoom has sort of, defined itself as the de facto standard of virtual events and staging. And so I really wish we could get some more integration from vMix. So if the vMix folks are listening, that's a huge request. So please, help support us in this endeavor. But so Andy and I were talking about a month or so ago about this, and what he came up with a way to pull the chat and the Q&A from the audience meeting and put that into a shared Google document. And so we can put that into a shared Google document, and now not only can, like a moderator that's in a separate meeting, be able to access that page and can actually, we'll show you some little scripts we've made to manipulate that data, but we can give that, that page to a moderator, and a moderator can actually see all the questions as they come in. They can see the chat messages as they come in. They can select a message that they want to send to screen, and we can throw that up on a lower third. So that's the problem that I've been trying to solve. And so Andy came up with a good solution for it. And so I'll let him kind of show you his, like what method he's come up with.
Sure. Yeah. And again, we see this customer requirement all the time about wanting to pull in and create live reactive graphics to help make the streams more interactive, right? It's a common customer requirement. And as Greg says, it's tricky to do out of the box with vMix. So one of the things that we've done in the past is use ZoomOSC to get the chat messages out and into Isadora. And sometimes we'll stop right there and we'll actually generate our graphics with Isadora, particularly after they added the new text draw actor that has the bounding box on the text. So you can push arbitrary text into it and get the size. So we've used that for virtual events to create all sorts of graphics that we'll then send over SDI through like a Blackmagic card, or we'll send it as NDI with alpha channel and overlay it on top of vMix. But if you want to be using GT title, what we've also done is we've used programs like Universe to listen to ZoomOSC and then send a request to vMix to actually use GT title to set up the graphic. The problem with that is that there's this missing intermediary step of the moderated remote producer, right, who gets the chance to see this in a sheet. And so the requirement really became, how can we get messages and Q&A from ZoomOSC and Isadora into Google Sheets? When Greg came to me and started talking about this, I had just finished writing the auto hotkey actor for Isadora, which we use today actually to do the Google Earth control. I don't see the Earth on our call today, but that you've probably seen it in the background where it's zooming between different locations as the question asker is going. That's just Isadora sending location information with a keyboard and mouse into a Google Earth that we capture and send out to production. So I thought, okay, maybe we can do the same thing here. Now I know there's an API for Google Sheets, but in order to be able to set up a REST endpoint for it, you'd have to create OAuth tokens, and it's not very scalable in my opinion. You can definitely do it, and somebody wiser than I will write out a program that manages this. But again, in this idea of like run and gun, figuring it out, we just used Isadora and the auto hotkey actor to pull it off. So let me show you how it works. So I'm going to switch my camera over to Isadora. And what you've got here is just a small patch with the auto hotkey plugin. So I'll walk you left to right. So on the left-hand side, we have the OSC listeners. This one is for chat messages. This one's for Q&A. And we do some formatting to it, and we store it inside of this custom database. Let me scroll over a little bit here. So this is just a JavaScript database. And the reason this is important is that it buffers the messages. So people can be interacting at an arbitrary speed. We're storing them up, and then we're drawing down on this buffer at a constant rate so that we're writing into the sheet, with a constant speed. Then we do a little bit of logic, and out on the other side, we have the auto hotkey scripts. So these are little text scripts that I wrote, and they're all up on the Office Hours GitHub for doing things like go to a specific cell in a Google Sheet, or move to an adjacent cell in a Google Sheet, or enter a row of data into the Google Sheet, and adding a checkbox. So we string up these little self-terminating scripts, and with ZoomOSC, so I'm in a Zoom meeting on my phone here. So I'm going to show you that I have a spreadsheet open over here. So I'm going to, on my phone, in a Zoom meeting that I'm joined to, I'm going to say test message. I'm going to send that. And in a moment, what's going to happen is it's going to go over here and it's going to automatically enter in the data. It's going to put whether it's a chat or a Q&A, it's going to put my name as the participant who asked the question. It's going to enter the content of the message and then create 2 checkboxes. And the reason for those checkboxes is that Greg is going to utilize those later to be able to help sort the messages. Was this chat message actually a question that we want to include as though it were put in the Q&A? And likewise, was this thing selected for it to go out to vMix? So I'm going to turn it back to Greg to show you what happens from here, how he uses the Google Sheet script to help manage the moving between the tabs, and then ultimately how it ends up in vMix. And then we'll jump over to your questions.
Can you put a question in, Andy?
Yeah, I can put which tab do you want to be in? Do you want? I have copy of Zoom Social Demo too.
Just put a just put a question in.
Question: how are you?
Put it in the main. Just post it in the main.
Yeah, there you go. It should show up in a sec. There you go.
Okay, that's okay. You put it in as chat. Can you put in a Q&A?
No, I can't. I'm in a meeting.
Flag is Q&A.
We can adjust the flag here, but I'm not in an actual meeting or webinar. So you see that on your side?
Okay, so I'm just going to show you my screen here. So I'm not a coder, guys. I'm really a novice at this, and this is just kind of a but I'm very good with my Google machine. And so I wanted the moderator to be able to have a way to sort of manipulate the questions themselves so that I didn't have to do it. We really wanted this to be with as much self-control as possible or do it yourself for the end users. So we basically just give this shared Google Doc link to the moderator or to a question screener or to any of the staff. And we tell them that only one person can manipulate it. So as data gets posted, everything gets posted here on the main part of the sheet. And so it'll just, as questions and chat come in, they just get posted right in this main part of the sheet. If something gets posted with the flag chat, it also gets copied over to this chat tab. So, and then if something comes in that's flagged as a question, it gets moved over to the questions tab. So if you've got a moderator and they don't want to look at everything, they don't want to see all the chat and everything else, they can just go to the questions tab. And if they've got a screener could come in here and sort of clean this up. So, and then from anywhere in here, so you see we've got these, so it comes in with a flag, whether it's chat or Q&A, it comes in with the participant's name, and then it comes in with the body of the message. And then, as Andy said, we have these two selection boxes over here. And the selection boxes serve, a couple of different functions. So one, the selected tab, if we choose that, what happens if we check that box, what happens is that row gets copied to the selected tab. And in the selected tab, we can then throw that up on the screen as a lower third in vMix. And then, invariably what happens is somebody will post a question in the chat. And so we wanted to have a way to be able to move that over. So if we go over to the chat tab here, you can see in the second column, it's moved to questions. So Andy did post a question in the chat. And so I'm going to just click that tab. And what that does is that copies that row over. Well, it's hard to see because we have that, but you can see that it's flagged in the first column as chat. And then if I select that again, I can throw my lower third up, and there is Andy's question. And so, and then once the moderator has asked this question, if they want to get rid of it, they can just click on dismissed. And that'll just move everything over to this dismissed tab. And then if somebody, has dismissed a question and they want to bring that question back, we've got an option here that they can move back to questions. And so we just uncheck and check that back. It moves that question back over to the questions tab. And so that's kind of how it works. And it's really easy to use. And so that's kind of how it works.
Sweet. Thanks, Greg. The last thing I wanted to say about this is that, if you are thinking about how to do customized Zoom-based solutions, and maybe you don't know how to use Isadora yet, you haven't gone to all the Thursday labs that Elle's been running or something like that. If you're looking to build more customized solutions, I'm happy to share with you that Zoom Event Services has pulled over the portfolio of customized services that Liminal used to have. So you actually can come to Zoom and say, I need this customized solution built out for you. And we're actually in a position to be able to do that now. So please get in contact with myself or Jonathan Cocatello, who will actually be the one to build these sorts of things. And we'll be using Isadora, Universe, custom OSC scripts, all that kind of stuff to be able to help you pull together these solutions. So super excited about that. And Alex, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, it looks great. And the thing that's really important is this is where virtual events are going to start pulling away from physical events. I'm just going to say, like, as these tools start to wind up and we're able to efficiently handle the questions, handle the comments, handle all of those things and get them in. This is still like Model T, like we kind of have this all working, but as this process starts to really flow forward. I'm really excited about where it goes from a scalable perspective of being able to have very large events run very, very smoothly. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Our first question comes from Jonas Dautel in Stuttgart, Germany. Is there an API from the Zoom side that could get you the questions as well?
Yeah, so if you look up our articles about our APIs, we do offer something called the in-meeting chat. Now, the in-meeting chat, unfortunately, is only available to you if you're recording the session and you've enabled record the chat and the meeting has ended. So you're only able to get the chat in a non-live way from that API endpoint specifically. So no, there isn't a live chat API that I'm aware of that you could use to pull this from. Again, the sort of the in-meeting API, so to speak, is ZoomOSC. Because ZoomOSC gives you all of these events at the OSC level. Of course, you could then translate those to REST. I know Jonas has done this before, but ZoomOSC was created to act as the missing in-meeting API for Zoom. So that's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, next question.
Jonas Dautel from Stuttgart, Germany says, how does this solution compare to the ZoomChatProxy open source on the Office Hours GitHub? And he shares the link for that.
Yeah, so I've definitely seen that, and it's super cool. What that one does is it sits next to ZoomOSC and turns all of the ZoomOSC chat messages into HTTP that's formatted for H2R graphics. And then H2R graphics can be brought into vMix and done out from there. So the requirements for this project were a little different. We had to be able to have that man in the middle, which was the Google Sheet, so that the moderator only needs to handle a Google Sheet. They just have to sit there in front of a spreadsheet and moderate there. So that's one difference. The other difference is that we're using vMix native titling versus H2R graphics. But of course, all of this, again, it's conceptual, it's modifiable. We can build out whatever we need to do, especially now that Isadora has the post URL text component of the get post URL text actor, where we can basically send REST packages to whatever we want. We could absolutely send to H2R. And again, I fully expect that what somebody will do is they'll, see something like this, and then you'll actually build out an application for handling these types of messages and turning them on to third-party services. Again, what we're here to do is build the demonstration, show the capability, and then hope that people take it from there to actually make a professional solution on top of it, if that's something you were interested in doing.
Next question.
Daniel Goldstein from Washington, D.C. asks, any update on when ZoomOSC will be able to move attendees between breakout rooms? I'd like to be able to pick people up and move them around, like in SimCity.
And now for something completely different. Yeah, we have a updated copy of ZoomOSC and ZoomISO scheduled for release this summer. That's probably about all I can tell you on that, but stay tuned.
Yeah, I have to admit that is something that I'm really tracking closely, is being able to have, let's say, 10,000 people, break them into groups of 5 based on some variables, and then put them all back to where they were, and and be able to reorder them, possibly have them pull into other groups, and all of those things, being able to move all of those around, and it would be pretty cool.
And I know, Grant's here. We know we've done this at scale before with the beta version of ZoomOSC. It's a game changer for workflow. The ability to just be able to create conversations on the fly through a web portal, that's just remote piloting these OSC instances is huge. So super exciting.
And Grant, it's worked well as far from your perspective.
Yeah, there's definitely been some hurdles to get over. There's a few systems to connect, but specifically when you can connect an external database that's telling you about details about your attendees, and then be able to say, okay, this is how you want to categorize those people, and then say, now let's push those into these breakouts across 40 different Zoom meetings.
Right.
That type of stuff, it's really coming together, and in fact, this week, I've just been able to. I'm super excited about how I'm connecting. I'm getting our web servers talking OSC, and being able to talk to local networks of OSC, and it's just been a huge game changer for me. So I've actually managed to avoid using Isadora, which is exciting for me, but it's so I've managed to get down to the command line level, which means that our web server can can push out all of the command lines to all of the OSC, ZoomOSC instances, which now means we can just program it all, and now it's just a couple of buttons. So in theory, anyway. So, but to answer the question, it is actually just connecting all of those different systems, and yeah, I'm super excited about it. It's very current.
One of the things that we've talked about before is the power of taking multiple points of entry at once into the Zoom development platform. So, Grant is an expert in Zoom APIs, right? And ZoomOSC is a meeting SDK application. But what happens when you can bridge both worlds together? So have everything from the pre-meeting scheduling APIs, then you're in the event and you have all the management of the sessions coming from the meeting SDK, then you're back out for the post-event analytics and you're back in the API world. Being able to mix and match our developer platforms together to create end-to-end solutions is a really emerging way of doing development, and it's something we're really excited to support at Zoom.
And as someone who's not an API expert, I really love the fact that we're able to tie these into Isadora and sit there and have kind of a low code solution where we can build a really complex relationship between stuff. I mean, the show that you're watching right now is run on Isadora. There is an enormous amount of things that are going on in the back end that makes this all work. And it would be a lot of code. And the thing is that it's not just that there's a lot of code, it's that it's harder to move around, and harder to make new decisions. And so I think that it's exciting. And again, I'll just keep coming back to what's exciting about a lot of these things is that the scale at which we're going to be able to work. I mean, this is the beginning. We go out 2 years, and it's going to be, meetings and events that we couldn't imagine. There's just this point where you couldn't, no one could imagine what you would do with an iPhone a year before or 2 years before the iPhone existed, and I think that we're about to move into this space of virtual events where we couldn't think about what was going to be possible. Next question.
Could I just add? Yeah, I just wanted to add on that, and that is that totally agree with you, Andy, that the idea that we can do some stuff that is local. To pick up the point that Greg was saying about petitioning vMix about kind of getting that data, I think their hands are tied in the sense that all of what the data that they are getting is from web APIs, and to not rely on anything local or physically tied to a local machine, but to be able to get that data directly from Zoom. And maybe one day, we have. I know that there was talk of things that the protocols just the chat protocol. What is that chat protocol? Anyway, they were talking about more of a stream of data coming from Zoom that you could subscribe to, and that would be very very exciting. But I was also just going to add to about the graphics element, things like this, that we're pulling in all of this different data from different places. As I was saying, we've already collected data from Zoom, but also from our attendees. So pulling that back in, it's pretty amazing. I was able to also get the same system. I'm controlling my X32 and mix effect. And so now the concept of being able to say across 5,000 people, I can just quickly type in Alex Lindsay and go bang. I don't know which meeting you're in. I don't know what gallery you're in. I don't know what channel you'll pop up on the X32. But with that one hit, you will now be pinned. You'll now be in the preview bus of the ATEM, and you'll be unmuted, and away it goes. And so to be able to do that live interaction across so many meetings, really the sky's the limit. We just need to have the vision to see the future.
Are you able to, Andy, pass not just the chats, but like emojis and so on and so forth, reactions?
Yep. We have in the beta version of ZoomOSC, we have the // emoji changed callback, which gives you a code for what emoji was used. I used this with Isadora I was teaching a class this semester on using Isadora with Zoom, where I was stepping in for a friend of mine to teach a couple guest lectures. And one of the projects that the students did was they took the number of clap emojis that people put up in the chat and used that to create increasing and decreasing audience applause in Isadora. They pumped in as audio into the meeting, which was super, super cool to see.
Yeah.
Just the idea that they're integrating the sort of the oral experience with just those reaction callbacks. So that is available in ZoomOSC, and I've seen some cool stuff with it.
Yeah, one of the things that we've experimented with a little bit is taking that data. So that's just, graphics and audio, but taking that data and then translating it back to a kinetic event on stage. So basically you send that back out to an Arduino, and the Arduino now is taking something. And, in our case, it was pulling a trigger for a flamethrower, but it can be anything, turning lights on and off. It can be moving things around. It can be people we did one where we had participants doing a tug of war. So they had to keep on typing on emojis on one side and the other person had to type it. And there's a little motor pulling it back and forth. And so you've got hundreds of people trying to get something to the other side. And it creates a whole new set of, beyond the graphics, there's a lot of things you can do in the real world that's driven from the data that you're deriving. Now let's go to the next question.
Yeah, Alex, could I just jump in real quick? If we could get some of the folks that are actually in the office hours webinar to just go ahead and post a few chat comments and some questions, we may actually be able to sort of demo this in a more live fashion. So I just want to populate the sheet a little bit, and then we're going to show it update.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in the webinar watching this right now, go ahead and throw some questions in, throw some chats in, so on and so forth, and then we'll grab those.
Let me just say be kind. Don't copy and paste. There are certain characters that this doesn't seem to like at the moment. So don't copy and paste from a website. Just type some stuff in, and should be good.
Next question.
Jonas Dartel from Stuttgart, Germany asks, could this be done all in a Zoom app as well?
Yeah, so Zoom Apps, just for context, is a developer framework that basically gives you a browser inside of the Zoom client to be able to put web content into. And then it also has our Zoom Apps SDK, which allows you to access some client level behavior. So the question really is what's the definition of this in the context of this question, right? Because there's all sorts of ways you could look at this. Are we talking about creating live graphics inside of Zoom? Well, maybe that is something with the Layers API that we actually could create the graphic entirely inside of a Zoom app. If we're talking about being able to communicate with native systems from that web, it might be a little more complicated. If we're talking server-to-server connections, where we're forwarding the interactions out and then maybe doing something in a web server, that could be possible as well. I don't know if you might be able to do something like connect to GT title through requests from a local Zoom app or something like that. But the point is, it's a very open framework, and the question really becomes, what do you want to do with it? And what's the specific journey that you're looking to take with your Zoom app? But I can certainly say to you that live and reactive graphics is a very active area of Zoom app development, particularly with our Layers API and camera mode and things like that.
Next question.
Now, a sergeant from Fullerton, California asks, so a question moderator or client can manage these all in a Google Doc?
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I think that was, Greg's customer requirement was basically that, hey, we need to be able to get somebody who's non-technical, can't get in the weeds of Isadora, can't really hand them a complex universe interface. We don't want them to be in a database system. We just want to be in a plain old Google Sheet, use some formulas to help move it around, use maybe some small scripts running in the Google Sheet to help us get it from between tabs. And then vMix will pick it up through the social integration for GT title from a tab of that sheet. So yeah, that was the requirement.
And actually, if we can get if you guys can put my camera on screen, you can kind of see the sheet kind of update in real time here as people kind of add some stuff to it. So you can see that this questions tab, a few questions have come in, so they have automatically kind of rolled over to the questions tab. And so I'm going to select this question from Guy Cochran about where did I get my cool glasses? And now I can just throw that up on the screen at the bottom as a lower third in vMix.
That's great. Next question.
The next question is from Dennis Champion Walker in Mansfield, Nottinghamshire. And I say, Greg, could you show us the question graphic again? It got covered up by the office hours lower third, but you just did that.
What timing?
Read your mind.
The next question.
Noah Sargent from Fullerton, California asks, Greg, did you need to select each question in vMix, or did the Google Sheet queue the L3 automatically?
No, the Google Sheet, or actually, so vMix has a thing in it called data sources. And so one of the data source options in vMix is the Google Sheets. And so you can tie the Google Sheet into a data source in vMix, and then the data source can get automatically applied to a lower third. And there's a few different ways you can do it. The way that I have it set up here is it just looks for row 1 on that selected tab. We've also used data sources in vMix for things like names and titles. And so you can have that open and you can select a certain row. And when you have that row selected, it becomes active in the lower third. So that's how it's doing it. So whenever the moderator hits the selected checkbox, in fact, I'm just going to put my screen back up again here. So what happens is let's say I'm just in a question here, and whenever the moderator hits selected, so that box is checked. And then if I go down here to the bottom to the selected tab, you can see that row is now copied here. And so in my data source in vMix, that is now tied into my lower third. And so I can throw the lower third up at the bottom of the screen here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the selected tab is like the prepped text, and then in vMix, you get to select which one of those you actually bring on screen. Is that correct?
Right, and we tell them, if I've used it about 4 or 5 times now in actual production, and we tell the group that all the participants can have the document open, but only one person is allowed to manipulate it. And so, I could give you the link to this spreadsheet, and you could actually make the selections, and you could move stuff around.
Like reformat, like if a question has a misspelled word or something, you can make the adjustment.
And you can also pre-populate it. Like if you wanted to pre-populate it with questions, it'll also write at the bottom. So
very cool.
Let's go to the next question.
John Preto from Las Vegas, Nevada says, isn't it true that Zoom Studio is coming soon with built-in Fenwick framer, LUF meters, ISO video, and audio, all with 4K HDR?
No comment. Don't get me fired, guys.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden from Hollywood, California says, this solution for scraping questions from Zoom and bringing them in for graphics is great, but it seems to be only a one-way path. Any way to send messages back to the questioner to let them know they are next up, etc.?
Well, you absolutely can send messages back through ZoomOSC. So it'd be a different activation, but I know Greg talked a little bit about a previous example where he had used our chat bridge version of this, where instead of going out to a sheet, it just transports chat from meeting A to meeting B. And there's actually a bidirectional version of it that can send messages back from the panel to the attendee chat as well. So you absolutely can send messages and interactions using ZoomOSC to basically build a chat bot that can do upstream interactions as well. It's not scoped for this project, but yeah, you absolutely could do everything from, saying that your question's up next to doing things with like a fake kind of tally or whatever you wanted to do. You can have ZoomOSC send chat messages based on external systems.
Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana says, is this more a Zoom event/webinar tool then, or can you pull these chat messages out of regular Zoom meetings?
Anywhere ZoomOSC can go, you can pull this data out of. So that's a lot of things. Notably not Zoom events right now. We did announce that compatibility for that's coming this summer. So if you are using a webinar or meeting created by a Zoom event for which there is no such concept as a meeting ID and password, there is not currently a way for any SDK app to join those sessions. I think even Zoom Rooms compatibility is still something that's like, it's either brand new or it's coming very soon, and we've talked about it. So be advised of what can and cannot connect to a Zoom event. But yeah, this can go anywhere ZoomOSC can go.
Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana asks, for hybrid, is there a way to integrate, say, Slide, since there isn't a separate poll or Q&A app for Zoom within this workflow to bring the local and remote clients together?
Well, as I said, one of the things that we've done in the past is we've integrated the question systems that are used in a variety of locations to drive a common graphic in Isadora that's put on the stream that's shown back to the in-person audience and is pumped on stream for the remote audience. We've even customized that graphic and the way it looks for each audience. And that was something that Jonathan built out here at Zoom about a week ago. So we've absolutely done something like that. But when it comes to the general question of integrating web content into the Zoom experience, that's where Zoom Apps comes into play. That's where, the ability to take something like Mukana, for example, and show it in the sidebar right there of the Zoom client, and then actually have an SDK that if you wanted to do anything where like you could scrape out the in-meeting chat and Q&A and cross-post it into other systems, that's the whole purpose of Zoom Apps. So if you have like, hey, does X service, web-based service work with Zoom? It might not work out of the box, but if you can convince them to create a Zoom app, or if you really need to, you can have them talk to me and I can help them create a Zoom app. You can integrate it into the client. Yeah.
Next question.
JJ McKenna from Santa Venetia, California asks, will this be an Isadora tutorial that Elle might include in one of his brilliant after hours sessions?
Yeah, so all the files for this project are open source, and they're available on the Office Hours GitHub. And I'm happy to talk to Elle about what they could do in a future session to cover this more.
Next question.
Jesse Mills from San Francisco Bay Area asks, since Zoom Meetings does not currently have a Q&A feature, I have been using ZoomOSC to make the chat into live graphics using ZoomOSC. Is there a better way within Zoom Meetings?
As far as I'm aware, the only way without writing your own Zoom app or your Zoom SDK application is to use ZoomOSC to externalize the chat message to a third-party system for graphics. So I think ZoomOSC is acting as a de facto in-meeting API. As I said, our Zoom APIs don't have the ability to give you chat messages as they're received in the in-session chat. Our Zoom chat is also the term for our out-of-meeting asynchronous chat tool, where there is more ability to bring in bots and things like that. So if you Google this, don't get confused. They're both called Zoom Chat, but one of them is the in-meeting chat. One of them is the out-of-meeting chat. It's available in the client, but they're both called Zoom Chat, I know. But it's just something to watch out for when you read that documentation. As far as I'm aware, ZoomOSC is the only way to pull it.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
I just want to say, I don't know if we went over earlier, if Andy mentioned this in his introductory remarks, but as far as ZoomOSC goes in this integration, you can use the free version. You actually don't have to have a licensed version of ZoomOSC to be able to pull to pull this data from it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana says, if you have a question with a URL like apple.com/us-edu/store, how does that affect the formatting, especially if it's really long text? How many lines of text can it effectively show, or can you filter them out automatically?
Well, I can say a couple of things on filtering and maximum characters, and I can let Greg talk about his real world experience of dealing with this. But so the way that this works is it should just cut character by character type the string. Again, that's one of the advantages that we're not using like an API necessarily. We're literally just like Isadora is acting like a human typing on a keyboard and clicking the mouse to do this data entry. So it doesn't care that happens to be a hyperlink when it goes character by character. In terms of moderation and filtration, absolutely. You can have all sorts of things that watch the that are in between the sending node and the coming in node. Matter of fact, there's a database cleanser inside of one of those JavaScript actors that looks for malformatted characters and just rips them out of the string before it types them up, so that your strings are a little bit more sanitized before they go to air. There's even some fonts that you can choose that will recognize the character codes that Isadora types out and turn it back into whatever special character it was on the other receiving side. So we've done that at Zoom as well. But Greg, I know you've had some experiences about like what to avoid and what to put in, particularly for copying from external sources into the Zoom chat versus typing natively in the Zoom chat.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to like for right now, it doesn't seem to like carriage returns. And when I was testing it earlier, I was copying and pasting from like some website, like some news websites from like WashingtonPost.com. So I was copying some articles. It doesn't like the double hyphen, the long hyphen. It doesn't like the the fancy quote marks. But for the most part, if you're just typing stuff in Zoom, it works pretty well. It doesn't. It will not display emojis. So I know somebody had asked about emojis earlier. I don't know. It might be a Sheets thing where Sheets won't display the emojis. I know that Andy said ZoomOSC can capture it, but the sheet won't. We'll just display it as garbage characters.
Next question.
Next question is from Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin. Looking at the event as a co-host, I can enter chat but cannot ask questions. How do you get around that, especially if you have some participants act as moderators?
Yeah, so this gets into that whole thing about meeting topology again, where again there is no way that I'm aware of for you to be able to capture your panelists in the same meeting as the attendees and deliver a graphic result in sync, unless you're doing something where you're writing your own Zoom app and like labeling the feed inside of all the clients. There's not a way for you to leave Zoom and come back to Zoom. So there's sort of two parts to this, like from a graphics perspective. So that's a non-starter. So you'd have to have them in a separate meeting anyway. But you are correct that there is this weird behavior where when you're on the panel asking questions of that same panel, it's kind of assumed that they're going to be answering things versus asking things, which is again why it's important to be able to hook into external question asking systems that have more functionality like Mukana and others. And then the power of this synergy with this with these backend tools, they can communicate with them and create the graphics there and bridge all that stuff. But yeah, that is a limitation to be aware of.
There you go, Jeffrey.
But Greg, you did say that you could put it into the back end, so you could have these people also have access to that spreadsheet and enter their questions that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a shared Google document. That's all it is. And so you can share the link with as many people as you want. You just like the main thing is just to avoid, to keep things simple and to avoid any errors. You just really need to have one person who is authorized to manipulate it. So you just have, you don't want like several people pasting and writing in cells and selecting and dismissing. You know, you want one person that's gonna manage the sheet.
Next question.
And Jeff, for the other
and that can be.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that could be some. You know, sometimes the moderator of the panel wants to have that responsibility themselves, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes the moderator doesn't want to have to focus on external, or they want to be able to focus on very few things. So what some of my clients will do is they'll have a question screener. So they'll have somebody in here that sits in this doc, and they will really doctor it and tailor it up quite nicely for the questions that they want to receive. So they'll use that dismiss button. They'll get rid of questions that they don't want the moderator to be bothered with, and they'll really clean that questions page up to be very specific to the message that they're trying to get across.
Okay, go ahead, Grant.
I just thought of this before. We've been using Zapier quite a lot, which does talk to Google Sheets, and you can do a webhook. You can just set up a webhook in Zapier to receive the data and then put it straight into Sheets. So it's a nice way of getting around that OAuth, issue with trying to talk to Google Sheets directly. So that could be another way. And the other trick I was thinking of as well, Alex mentioned one time about using different sheets that reference other sheets. And so one of those limitations of Sheets, firstly, let me say how amazing it is, and everyone's using, Sheets to amazing benefit across events. But one of the annoying things is when you share a link, it either is editable or it's viewable. And so I thought about this, Alex, when you were talking about how you were sharing, pulling data from different sheets, that you could create a view-only version of that sheet that's just referencing the other sheet. And so now you can just send a view-only version to all of the people that you only want to view, and then you could just have that one link that you share. I don't know if that would work in your instance, Greg, but yeah, once thinking about referencing other sheets in another sheet kind of creates that option to have editable versions and only viewable versions.
And the other thing for Jeffrey just to be aware of is you can just have your panelists enter it as a chat message because they do have access to that. And then again, we can flag it as a question in the sheet if it's actually a question that showed up in the chat. That was one of Greg's really, I think, brilliant insights with this project is like, hey, that happens a lot, that people are not putting things in the right place. Let's make sure we have a system to automatically copy it over into the right section for the screener. So that would be another option for you.
Yeah. Next question.
And another thing too, we really wanted to make this do it yourself. And so the idea, initially was we were going to make a universe controller. And so in the universe controller, we were going to have a big button for send to screen. And then below that, we were going to embed the spreadsheet, the Google Sheet in that. And then ideally, we would give the client one URL and they would actually have full control over it. They would be able to manipulate the sheet and then be able to hit the send to screen button so they could make their selection, and then they could actually control what got sent to screen themselves. We set it up and it looked great, but the problem is that Universe Controller will not fire the scripts on the Google Sheet. So we couldn't do it that way. So we do have a mechanism now where we can share the sheet, and then also in another browser tab, we can give them a button that will allow the client to actually control the send to screen. So we do have a fully do-it-yourself solution set up for it, but it's not quite as elegant as we originally envisioned it to be.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Braille, California asks, with only one person moderating the Google Doc, is there a way to flag certain offensive language or content, or would others have to flag it for the one?
Well, one thing I'm happy to share with you is that we now have additional moderation tools for the Zoom chat available. I think that was just announced. Saw it on the website the other day, so I know I can talk about it. So there is now a system for you to moderate it before it even gets into the system, and to have words that it's looking for. Now, if you don't do that and you go downstream of that, you could have Isadora manage that lift. You could have it have a list of words that it screens for before entering into the database and just throws out things, or asterisks out offensive language or whatever your request is. So you could do that in the Isadora level. And again, you could also, you could, if you really wanted to flag it, I suppose you could modify the program to have another field that, says that this question might be contentious or something like that, just for the moderator to view in the sheet level. So there's a lot of different tools that you have to get in the middle of that moderation pipeline. And part of the beauty of it too is that it's just a Google Sheet for the person on the other side. So you can build all this stuff out and not have to worry about them wrangling any of that. It's just available to them.
And it wouldn't be hard for a moderator to go in and actually edit a cell. They could do that. But again, the question was, do you need one person or two? We really only want one person manipulating the sheet. If more than one person starts manipulating the sheet, we're gonna encounter errors.
Next question.
JJ McKenna from Santa Venetia, California asks, for the upcoming NAMM event, would this workflow make sense for questions from producers a week in advance of the event?
We're just going to build a separate instance of Makana for this, so we're not going to need it. This is a really cool way to do it without Makana. Makana is got a couple extra features, so we're probably going to use Makana for that. But we're just going to build a separate instance out, and then we're just going to pass people from one Makana to the other for that. Next question.
Look, Miguel Lopez Waterman from Salisbury, Maryland asks, Mark, how is it to see all of these new uses for Isadora?
Mark had to jump out. But he did leave a message saying that he thought it was super cool to see this use case. He and I were chatting last night. He really wants to see the globe. I'm so sorry we weren't able to show it to him today when he was here, because he was really excited about that. But we'll have to show that to him some other time. But he and I were talking last night, and he's pretty excited about it.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, is there a way to contribute to the Zoom ISO beta program? What is the best way to follow this progress?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is be subscribed to the newsletter at liminalet.com for all of our latest communications, be in our Slack group where we also, have some community conversation around these tools. You can also, when we're in a position to be able to do a more widely distributed beta version of what we're releasing this summer, this is going to be one of the first places I go to say, hey, who wants to play? So, this will be hard to miss if you're in office hours already. But if you're looking externally in, you can get all the latest communication from liminalet.com in the newsletter.
Okay, next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, what would be a useful minimum viable product for a Keynote OSC utility that would be an adjunct to Zoom OSC? Thinking of writing one.
Yeah, I've seen a handful of these Keynote OSC related questions from Douglas over the past couple of days, and I've been thinking about it. And truly the way to do it is Keynote OSC is really just a save file for Osculator, because Osculator allows you to receive an OSC message and then execute a corresponding Apple script. So there's no need to go down to the code level to do this project. All you need to do is sit in Keynote OSC, in Osculator for a bit and build out a Keynote OSC preset where you have written an Apple script for every behavior that you want to control in the Keynote presentation. And then you've defined an API syntax on the left side of Osculator to say what the inputs should be that control that. And you can do all sorts of really complex behavior in Osculator. So rather than code this from scratch, I would just say, go download Osculator and build a really good preset file. And that'll be a good way to build this out.
Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana says, would this be a similar for displaying polling results, or is there a similar set of OSC commands for that?
Well, there is a default display for the polling results, but I'm taking the question as you want to do something customized, like a custom graphic versus one of the default Zoom reporting metrics for a poll. Right now, we don't expose poll results over OSC. I'll take that as a feature request. It's definitely a good one. I can totally see the reason why you'd want to interpret the data in a visual way that is other than the way that Zoom provided it to you. Maybe you want to brand it, maybe you want to do whatever. It would be super cool to be able to take poll results, go into Isadora and create a bespoke graphic, reactive graphic or whatever, that just listens for some OSC data to drive it. That would totally be possible. Let me take a look at the SDK and then see what we can do.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, what utility or application would make production within the Zoom Isadora ecosystem easier?
I'll turn that to the group. Those of you who've been using this, I'm too deep to know what's really.
I don't know. We'd have to think about that one a little bit. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael comes back with, Mark, have you thought about pathways to marketing Isadora outside the academic and artistic communities, corporate training programs et al.?
I think we're doing that right now. I mean, I think our use of it has really, I think, changed the way a lot of people look at Isadora. Andy's showing us Isadora, and then Elle's supporting us with Isadora, and then a bunch of people here playing with it has definitely, I think, moved it to a lot of us thinking about it in a different way than we did before. It's pretty powerful. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana says, Andy, is there any way you're aware of to join a Zoom meeting from Android with an external USB camera?
Okay, so I looked into this. You asked me this last time I was here, and I told you I would look into it, and I did. So I'll tell you what I found. So basically, inside of the meeting SDK, if you are to look at the list of video devices that the SDK says are available, no, you can't see external sources from there. Now, what I think you could do, this would be something we'd have to try and let me know, how it's going. But if you use the video SDK, what allows you to send arbitrary video frames out through the transport topology, you're not going to see the device in the listed camera list that's there. But you could absolutely have your own driver that's receiving frames outside of our SDK, then bring in the frame to the SDK in a standard like YUV format, and then transport the frame. So I believe you could write a custom app to do this that, again, it's receiving video from an external source, converting it into a Zoom compliant format and bringing it in. There may also be a way inside of the meeting SDK, which is a lot more valuable, I think, in this specific use case, because you want to use Zoom meetings as the transport solution. There may be a way to send the raw video frame because we've just exposed some raw inputs and outputs in the SDK there as well. But again, the way to do it, I think, is you're not going to see it when Zoom displays the list of devices. That's a security thing. But you're going to want to look external libraries that can detect UVC cameras on Android, copy the frame into a compliant format, then bring it into the SDK and do the transport there.
And last question.
Douglas Carmichael says, have you ever thought of decoupling the Isadora engine from the user interface for greater flexibility in cloud deployment?
Yes. This is so one of the things that I have been brainstorming about is what would a light version of Isadora look like without the media engine and the OpenGL requirement. So it could be deployed on a cheaper Amazon instance and it would just have the GUI and logic functionality. Because again, while we all the time will use the rendering pipeline in Isadora for various graphics, in the case of this project and a handful of other control focused projects where we're not using our OpenGL rendering systems on the back end, it would be nice to have a lightweight version of it. I don't know that. I don't know how Troicatronics will feel about that. Good question for Mark. Maybe it's good to have Mark on for a second hour at some point soon, and we can dig in with him about some of this stuff.
We got a couple more questions that slipped in. Next question.
Grant Whitehead from Adelaide, Australia says, is it possible to launch multiple ZoomOSC Mac instances on one Mac from command line with OSC port parameters?
Yes, there is an API. We don't publish it for security reasons, but there is a CLI that you can use for that, and I will send it to you later.
Thank you.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Tony Robbins sold 20,000 tickets to his seminar on Zoom. What will it take to realize more successes at scale that will drive online events forward into the mainstream?
Well, I would love to hear Grant's thoughts on that, as somebody who's plugged into that world for sure. I'd love to pick up the tail end of the question after the panel has a chance to respond.
Yeah. So there's some large scale events that we are involved in, and something like those with the 20,000. There's a couple of different studios that are being used, or stadiums. We kind of call them virtual stadiums. And often they have something like 40, 50 Macs on site. And so they're doing a bunch of meetings, hosting meetings on site. And then often there's also a bunch of the meetings that are hosted in the cloud that 1F Jeff is involved in. And so the idea that, and at the moment, it literally is people running up and down, or maybe in office desk chairs that they're sliding up and down, aisles of computers and clicking all the buttons to open breakouts, for example, or monitor different things across the different meetings. One of the big advantages with events like Tony Robbins is the volunteer base that they have, their crew. So on an event like that, there might be 300-400 volunteers and so they're spread out all through those Zoom meetings, and so they're the eyes and ears. They're able to, often lots of them are co-hosts, and so they can manage lots of what's going on with the audience. And so then it really is just the management of particularly breakout rooms. But what we're talking about here is potentially the ability to control breakout rooms and things in with ZoomOSC, and now being able to trigger that from one central place, either Isadora or something else, and do all that at once is very, very exciting. And I think it's going to make it even easier to do that at scale. So yeah, the event we've done 35,000 people in one event. We had 130,000 people registered for the event, so we had lots of different people coming through it. But we at the most we had at one time was 35,000, about 140 meetings. And so yeah, but as I said yesterday, we have very likely this year to have 500,000, at least an event with the potential of 500,000 in Zoom, and so that's a pretty exciting, a good benchmark for us to get to the 1 million, which is what I want to get to. I want to blow past 100,000 and get to 1 million. So,
and I think that is where, again, I keep saying this, but the big game is about to become virtual meetings and virtual events, because you just simply cannot have the same reach. All these physical events, really only reach the 0.00001% of the addressable market. And so being able to include people globally is going to make a big difference. And as these tools pull together, as these tools start to get smoother, I mean, we're still looking at this very basic, we just invented a wheel, but we're not, but I think that as we move forward, companies and organizations are going to realize that they can put this together. We were putting together a proposal that didn't go through, mostly because these tools didn't exist yet, and we realized we couldn't do it. Which is this was a global event. We were going to have a plenary, and then we had groups from all over. These are diplomats, and so they're all from all over the world, and we wanted to be able to group them by their local group, by their region, or by the plenary, and so they can watch something. And then it was also going to stream live to YouTube and go up to satellite and everything else. And so the idea is that you can very quickly break them all together and have them have them all talking to each other in a small group, medium group, or the larger group, and all of those things can be integrated. And you're constantly being able to basically flex to that part of the day. I'm now dealing with 5 people or 20 people or 150 people or 20,000 people. And being able to do that is not possible in the physical world. Like it became very clear because it's number one, it's global. There's people coming in from all over the world, and we're able to tie them all together and make it all work. And that's the kind of thing that we envisioned it, we couldn't execute it. So I'm really excited to watch these. And we dropped out before we got to the point where we were eating the asphalt. But I think that we're really I know that with what everyone's working on here, a year from now, two years from now, that's not going to be a big deal. That's going to be almost boring, to do. Go ahead, John.
I totally agree with what Alex is saying. And I don't know if Grant can confirm or deny, but Eric Worre, who lives down the street from me, was one of the big ones that was 35 or 40,000 people. So it's way on its way down the road of becoming mainstream.
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, when you think of this particular tool, Greg, I was just curious if you thought if you did some sort of color coding or automatic type blocking so that you can have multiple moderators, take the first 100 questions and the second 100 questions or something like that to help at scale, if that would be useful.
Yeah, be good. Yeah, and Andy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is I feel like the future is, interactive conversations at scale, right? Which is really hard to achieve in physical space, right? But through these APIs and integrations, we can create, customizable experiences for audiences that we were never able to service like that before. I feel like physical events in many ways have to be a cookie cutter experience for the attendees because we can't offer a separate space physically for every single interest group and personality, right? And likewise, we can't offer interactivity because we have to have some sort of organization because of physical co-location, right? But we don't have those limitations in a virtual event. We don't need to be running things like concurrent sessions in, a virtual event. We have more time, we have more resources, we can come and go as we please. And what's so important to me is that we continue to develop the Zoom platform to have all the hooks so that, brilliant people like Grant can continue to come in and play around and do what they're doing with Obvio, which amazes me every time I look at it. We can continue to see other partners doing more integrated solutions, taking things that they've already made and make it part of the Zoom ecosystem. We're a platform company at this point. This is a platform level play. And we appreciate everybody out here who's helping us pioneer what we think is, the future of events.
Thanks so much for coming in, Andy, Greg, John, and the rest of the panel, and Mark, if you're listening to this. Just great to have all of you here. Thanks for taking the time out. We hope you keep on coming back every once in a while with a new update of we did something cool, and we'd love to have you there and then have you show off what you guys are working on. Thank you to our producers for the great questions, keeping this rolling, digging in deep, and it was a great set of questions and great panel today. Like just really great answers and just as always, but particularly good today. So it's really well done by the panel and the producers. And so stay tuned. We're going into the weekend. We'll still be talking about Keynote tomorrow. It's gonna be good. All right, we will now jump into After Hours. Look at how fast that came up. They're getting so good at that. It's starting to feel like a show.
30 minutes to the NAMM meeting.
You should do that in a breakout room. After hours. Thanks, Mark. All right. Thanks, guys.
Where's the NAMM meeting?
if you signed up, there's an email.
Yeah, well, maybe I didn't sign up yet.